You're listening to Let's Get Surety. Let me hear your bonding talk with Kat Shamapande.
Hey everyone, it's Kat Shamapande. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Let's Get Surety. I've got with me today my co-host Mark McCallum, CEO of NASBP. Hey Mark.
Hey Kat, great to be back.
Thanks for being on with me. I'm excited about our topic today. We've talked a lot about infrastructure and U.S. transportation needs, and today we're going to be talking about TRIP and U.S. transportation system needs with the best person to talk about on that topic, David Kearby, Executive Director at TRIP. Hey, David, thanks for being on.
Hey, Kat, how are you doing, Mark? Good to see you again. Thanks for letting me hop on today.
We're excited to have you on with us. To kick us off, David, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I actually came into this position with TRIP at the start of 2020. So had just a couple months under my belt. And then I don't know if you know, something big happened in the world. COVID hit, lockdowns happened. And so I basically kind of got up to speed in this role by just doing a lot of Zooms and not getting as much face-to-face. But prior to that, I worked for the Associated General Contractors of Washington State. Was involved quite a bit with transportation projects in the state of Washington. Actually got to chair a regional transportation partnership called Transaction, in which we tried to highlight and prioritize projects throughout Central Washington State. So had a decent, somewhat decent transportation background before coming on with TRIP. And again, since then have appreciated getting face-to-face time again, and especially with the folks at NASBP.
I don't know that there's anyone out there that's not excited to be in person again after the pandemic.
That's exactly right.
So knowing a little bit more about you is helpful, but not everyone out there might know what TRIP is. Can you tell us a little bit about TRIP and what you guys do?
Sure. Yeah, TRIP was founded back in 1971 as a private nonprofit organization to research, evaluate, and distribute economic and technical data on surface transportation issues. Our primary focus really is to build public and legislative support for increased funding to improve our surface transportation infrastructure, roads and bridges. We try to do that by generating timely strategic news, social media coverage, TV, radio coverage, issues that are important to the highway and transportation construction industry. So, I mean, that's a mouthful. I always like to just kind of dumb it down and say, we bring the importance of roads and bridges into your newsfeed.
David, that's such important work. And, you would think it'd be self-evident that people would understand the importance of transportation infrastructure and highways, but it's not. And you keep it in mind's eye. Could you tell us a little bit more about some of the ways in which you do that?
Sure. And you're right, Mark. It is an ongoing message. As I've been able to go around and share with groups, in fact, with NASBP last March when we were in Palm Springs, I kind of like to say, the reason we got started was because that message was not out there in the public.
Right.
And there's probably not a lot of people that remember 50 years ago, which is fine. But, at that time, you had expansion happening and people moving out into the suburbs. And of course, we were growing tremendously as a country. And you had a somewhat active group who was saying, hey, we don't need to build roads and bridges. It's not important. And so what you had happen were things, and I always use the example being from Washington State, the interchanges to nowhere. If you ever go up near Husky Stadium on Lake Washington, you'll see these monolith interchanges that just dead end. And that's because 1971, large project that was going to help take some capacity load off of I-5 through downtown Seattle. Just a small group got together. They lobbied their local elected representatives, and they stopped that project dead cold. So the industry really said, look, we've got to do a better job of telling our story and getting our message out there, and in a way that's not self-serving, but really just delivering the facts. What are the facts? And so that's really how TRIP was established. Those folks interested in the industry, NASBP, your members, very instrumental in being a part of that. In fact, I like to say Fitzgerald Hudson of Collier Cobb, he was one of our founding board members. And so you guys recognize the importance of that. And so we do try to get that message out to the public, Mark. And again, whether it be through TV, through news media, social media now is huge. A little harder to track how that's getting out, but people are certainly getting their news in that regard as well.
I love all the materials you produce, and you arrange for those press events that are so impressive. I know where I live in the Maryland, D.C. area, even that I see local coverage, and I think that's just so important. So can you kind of frame that a little bit more for us? I know that's an ongoing process, like you said, but you develop materials and then you set up these events. How do you do that?
Right. We work with, we have state partners in every state. A lot of times they are contractor chapters, whether that be AGC or ARTBA folks. However, we have other states where it's the Chamber of Commerce or maybe a Good Roads Foundation or other groups who work with us as partners who let us know, hey, here's kind of what we hear on the ground in the state capitol of what the needs are going to be this next year as we look at transportation. And so we work with our partners in developing a message that is going to be able to be received by the public on whatever that importance is, whether it's some challenges that are happening. Sometimes it's progresses. Hey, here's what we've accomplished these last few years. We need to keep our eye on the ball and continue moving forward. One of the things that we do not do, and I think a lot of people are confused by that because we are headquartered in D.C., is that we do not lobby. We are not a lobby group at all. I use you guys as an example. Larry does a fantastic job for you in D.C. Up on the Hill. I know you've got members in states that are extremely involved in state capitals. So the way I like to look at it is as Larry is talking in one ear of the elected representatives, our hope is that our message is getting out to the public for the need for infrastructure funding, and that the public is then speaking loudly into the other ear of the politician. And, put the two far ends aside, the far left and the far right. I think most politicians are populists, and so they do listen to what the public is telling them.
Absolutely. These are important subjects that need to be heard in stereo, as you say.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, 2022 was a big year for infrastructure, and I'm sure Trip had a number of highlights. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, it was. I think even before 2022, 2021 was the year certainly that all the conversation was happening on infrastructure. The IIJA passed just about a year ago now, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But, 2022, we kind of looked at that as being, okay, 2021, a lot of work in states, a lot of work in the national realm in terms of talking about the importance of needing some infrastructure funding. 2022, we knew was going to be one of those years where states were looking at kind of what this new IIJA was going to bring to them. Legislatures trying to kind of look at what the impact was going to be budget-wise with this money coming in. We also knew, that there were a lot of elections going on just a couple weeks ago. And so when those happen and when you have a lot of possible changes in the governor's mansion, we knew it was going to be a little bit slower year for TRIP in terms of state reports. However, we did, besides our 5 state reports that we did release throughout the year, we really focused on 3 national reports that we were able to release, communicating some key transportation messages throughout the year. So those really the bulk of our media coverage this year was based off those three primary national reports.
And those are so important to keep the importance of infrastructure front and center. Obviously, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was critically important and something badly needed. It's great to get that past the finish line. But we saw all the political brouhaha over that to get that there. We always like to think of infrastructure as bipartisan. It impacts the quality of life for everyone, although it's not always self-evident. You said you don't lobby, but that information you produce that really comes down to dollars and cents and time and resources, so critical for people to understand that. Can you kind of give us a little bit, maybe a rundown of the types of information that you release?
Sure. Yeah, and talking about some of these national reports we did in 2022, back in March, about the time we were in Palm Springs with NASBP, there was starting to be a lot of conversation of suspension of the federal gas tax, state gas taxes across the country. Of course, gas is still higher than I would like to see it. So some of those conversations remain, but that really was gaining momentum. And so what we did is we looked at that and we said, it's important for us to maybe now release a report, taking a look at the condition and the use of our roads and bridges and the funding mechanism that supports those repairs and investments. And so, again, right now we're very heavily reliant on gas taxes in terms of money going into the coffers for these types of projects. So that report, Mark, great example. That's a report that not only went out nationally, but we kind of then structured it into a white paper for our partners, for our folks like you guys. It's on our website, which I'll give a shameless plug. To go to tripnet.org, tripnet.org. You can access not only national information, but if you're in your state, there's some information on there. You can click on that. It's easily printable. If you're ever going into a conversation with your state representative or a local county commissioner, some great information in there to be able to have in your back pocket to be able to use. So that's a great example of how some of our information is used, not only for the public, but also for our members and our folks to be able to take with them on visits to their elected officials.
And as this funding flows through and projects now are getting underway or will get underway, do you foresee updating that information?
We will. We try to update those fact sheets first part of every year. Not only with the IIJA information that's going to come out, but other information that gets updated usually the first part of the year. Prior to the 4th of July weekend, we released a safety report in terms of highlighting some of the safety issues on our national roads and rural roads. That information usually gets updated first part of the year, and so we'll include some of that as we update those fact sheets come February, March.
Well, I know we'll look forward to that. We have a legislative fly-in, a federal legislative fly-in at the end of March. And those fact sheets are going to be really important as we visit with various congressional offices. So thank you for doing that.
Absolutely.
So, David, what are some of the, there's always challenges in transportation funding, despite the fact that we had, the infrastructure package through. What do you foresee are some of those challenges facing transportation in 2023?
Certainly, I think the elephant in the room that everybody knows is in the room is inflation. And that's probably one of the biggest issues. Even as we look at the IIJA here and the money that's come out, is you've got costs of projects that are 20, 30. I've heard from some members up to 40% above engineer estimates, and that is a huge increase in what we thought those projects were going to run. So in that, and again, this is not, TRIP doesn't really go into these things, but with that inflation, is that going to cause some states to maybe look at pulling back projects that they were going to do? That remains to be seen, but it certainly is probably one of the biggest challenges is inflation in terms of those dollars. Certainly with, our contractors and folks that I know you guys deal with, supply chain issues, workforce challenges, those certainly are there. But, other challenges that are out there, I think, for the country, as we look at our roads and bridges, preservation is going to be a huge challenge. Back in 2021, we did a report on the 65th anniversary of the U.S. Interstate Program. Hard to believe 65 years of our U.S. highways.
It is.
But, again, and through those years, and I use this as an example, there's been a lot of, let's say, just repaving versus maybe addressing underlying foundational issues that are going to need to be addressed because it just continues, that cost continues to go up. So you have preservation challenges, reliability challenges of our roads and bridges. COVID, we certainly saw a dramatic drop in our travel. I think all of us found ourselves at home more than we ever did. But Kat, like you say, it's good to be back face to face, and we're finding ourselves now traveling more. And actually, the Federal Highway Administration anticipates that vehicle travel is going to return slightly higher than it was in 2019 across the country, which would be a high. And so those things in terms of reliability on our roads, those are challenges. You certainly have traffic pattern challenges. We're all driving at different times of the day now than maybe, we drive to work at 7 and drive home at 6 in the evening. Now, maybe at 10 a.m., I'm working from home. I want to drive down and grab a coffee or go to the grocery store. And so we have those traffic pattern challenges as well. So.
Right. We kind of talked about had the conversation from a federal perspective, but you're not only influencing, federal policy, on transportation, but also state. And I know a number of states kind of took the bull by the horn in the last couple of years to try to get some transportation funding accomplished and so forth. Maybe talk a little bit more about, your state-specific efforts.
Sure. And actually, we are more focused. Our national releases certainly get a lot of coverage, but we are really more focused with our state partners, trying to make an impact at the state level, because that is really where a lot of the action can happen from the state capitol, as you guys know in your conversations. We have. In fact, we talked about 2022 being a slow year. Now that we're a year into the IIJA, now that states have kind of started to figure out what this formula looks like for getting the money in and projects identified, we've got about a dozen state reports that are in various stages, going to be ready to be released. But, Mark, as you say, there are some states that we work with that are certainly utilize our services quite a bit in terms of saying, hey, let's get a report out every year and let's kind of change up the message or maybe the topic of it, but still having that message of the importance of infrastructure funding. So I think what you're going to see as we head towards 2023 with some of TRIP's reports, and especially at the state level, we're going to be focusing on some of those progress reports. What has the state been able to accomplish? We call them progress and challenges. What have we been able to accomplish? But yet, what are the challenges that still remain, and what's going to need to happen? So those are going to be a lot of the emphasis on the reports that we have coming out here in the new year. Certainly, safety is going to be within that. I think all of us understand the importance of roadway safety. Not only vehicle traffic, but even with our pedestrians. Working from home, I look out my window. I've got a school zone near me. The amount of traffic at 3 p.m. I mean, again, pre-COVID, most people were at work and weren't hitting the roads till 5 or 6. Now there's a lot of traffic on the roads. And so I think safety wise, that's going to be a message that'll be repeated throughout 2023.
And do you have additional plans beyond that for 2023 in terms of trip activities?
Absolutely. Yeah. We'll look probably at another interstate report. It's been a couple of years since we did an interstate report. And, you talk about challenges that we see right in the forefront. Certainly since our traffic patterns have changed, that puts a tremendous amount of stress on our freight bottlenecks across the country. And I don't even want to get into if we happen to have a rail strike in a week or two, what that'll do with the freight on the roads. But it certainly has presented now as traffic comes back, as maybe you could get through a larger metropolitan area at 1 p.m. with not as much problem. Those days are kind of over with. And so these freight bottlenecks we see out there, tremendous challenges in terms of getting product from farm to market or farm to port, some of those things. So that'll be something that we'll focus on as well in the coming year is our freight network and freight challenges.
Oh, great. Well, I know all this good work doesn't happen for free, and as a not-for-profit entity, can you tell us how individuals or companies can support TRIP?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I mentioned at the beginning, we are a nonprofit. We survive off of contributions from our partners, from individuals, from groups like NASBP, from several of your members who are very actively involved with what we're doing. The nice thing is that the community behind the scenes that are our contributors, it's a nice broad coalition of folks, not only the surety folks, but quite a few contractors, suppliers, engineering firms, those
Right.
groups that are involved in seeing the need for TRIP to really exist and the need to get that information out there. And so, again, I would kind of direct you to tripnet.org. There's some information on there of how to be involved. One of the things I like to share is, shoot me an email, which my email is listed on the website. Shoot me an email and say, Dave, I live in Massachusetts. I'd love to know when you guys are doing a report here or nationally. And we
Great.
won't flood your email inbox, but we'll let you know when there's information coming out, and just kind of take a look at some of the impacts we've had over the years.
Well, and I know you mentioned, David, that you send out a lot of information via social media. Is it easy to go ahead and like and share that information and help get that message out that way as well?
NASBP, I use you guys as an example when I go talk to other industry groups of a group that is doing social media correctly. Anytime we have a national report, state reports, you guys are grabbing that and sending that out as well on your social media channels. And so I want to say thanks for that, for letting me be able to use that as an example. But again, just that amplified word that's getting out to the public is so vitally important. So, it's again, at the end of the day, communicating the benefits of transportation infrastructure, it's an ongoing necessity for the industry as a whole, really, as we move forward.
Yeah, well, thanks for citing us as an example. I hope we won't be the only example. And just to reiterate that anybody can use this information, right? Mm-hmm. It can be pushed out by anybody interested in advancing our transportation infrastructure. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, absolutely. If like I say, if you see on the NASBP social media channels, or if you email me, I'll put you in the loop to receive whatever report we're doing. And, the more the merrier. The more information we can get out to the public, the more the public understands, the better it is. Kat, you mentioned just that perception from the public. And again, all of us here are in the industry. We know that projects take a while, that money takes a while to flow. The perception is IIJA was passed last year. How come the road out here is not fixed? And, and so there's a frustration in that, and rightly so if you're not, if your mind is focused on other things. And so the goal is to get that information out of the importance of continuing that funding.
That's terrific. Well, I just want to thank you, David, for being on with us today and sharing a little bit about TRIP and what's going on in the U.S. with the U.S. transportation system. It's been great chatting with you.
No, I appreciate your time today. And like I say, really appreciate NASBP. I appreciate your members. They get it. It's a group of people that understand the need for this. I know we talked transportation today, but, it's roads and bridges that also get you to other commercial, residential, other projects that are out there in this. And so it's all one big pie that we're enjoying. So,
well, hopefully we'll be able to have you back again sometime to give us an update.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you guys. I'd appreciate that.
You've been listening to Let's Get Surety, brought to you by the National Association of Surety Bond Producers. For more information about the NASBP and its members, visit nasbp.org.